When you grow up in a family business, your childhood doesn't come with bedtime stories and scraped knees. It comes with inventory sheets, customer complaints, and the smell of printer ink and breakroom coffee that somehow seeps into your clothes like smoke. My name's Adam. I'm 32, and I've been involved in my parents' company for as long as I can remember. Not because they made me, but because I wanted to. I thought we were building something together, something that would one day be mine, or at least something we'd share. But I was wrong. So wrong. The business is a mid-sized printing company that my dad started in the late 80s with one beat-up Xerox and a garage full of boxes. Over time, it grew. We got contracts with local law firms, schools, real estate offices. My mom handled the books. My dad ran operations. And me? I started sweeping the floor when I was 11. By the time I was in high school, I knew how to fix jammed rollers faster than the techs. I learned how to balance ledgers, build client relationships, pitch to executives. I did it all, not because I was pressured to, but because it mattered to me. Because it was our family's legacy. And then there was Sarah. Sarah is my younger sister by 5 years. She's always been different. Where I was quiet, she was loud. Where I worked behind the scenes, she liked to be front and center. She was the kind of kid who'd get praised just for showing up, while I had to prove myself over and over again. I don't say that with bitterness. At least, I didn't for most of my life. I just thought that was the way families worked. Some people shine in the spotlight, others keep the lights on. I never expected applause. I just wanted respect. After college, I came back home and joined the company full-time. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved the rhythm of it. The early mornings, the regulars who came in like clockwork, the smell of fresh ink, the way my dad would nod at me across the warehouse floor after we landed a new client. We were growing. I spearheaded a push into digital printing, set up a new CRM system, built long-term client relationships that brought in over $500,000 in recurring contracts. Sarah, meanwhile, went to school for communications, then marketing, then, briefly, psychology. She bounced around between degrees, jobs, and cities, always chasing something shinier. She'd come home for the holidays, toss out big ideas no one asked for, and disappear again. Once, she told me I should rebrand the entire business for Gen Z. When I asked what that even meant for a commercial printing company, she just rolled her eyes and called me so literal. Still, I didn't mind. She was my sister. We were different, but family's family. Then, 2 years ago, she moved back. No warning. No big family meeting. Just showed up one day at the shop wearing heels that clicked too loud and carrying a laptop she never opened. She told my parents she wanted to help grow the brand. Said she had ideas. Big ones. They smiled like she was Moses descending from the mountain. I didn't think much of it at first. Let her try, I figured. She'd lose interest eventually. Except she didn't. She started showing up to meetings she wasn't invited to, criticizing long-standing clients for not matching our brand aesthetic, talking over me in front of staff, suggesting we phase out long-time vendors I had spent years building trust with. My parents, especially my mom, ate it up. "Isn't she so innovative?" they'd say. "She has such a natural flair for business." Natural flair? She'd never even set up a PO before. The real kicker came one Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of negotiating a complicated contract renewal with a client we'd had for over a decade, one that would secure 6 figures in revenue over 3 years. I had spent weeks preparing, and then Sarah walked into the room, latte in hand, and interrupted the meeting to pitch a completely unrelated branding package she had mocked up in Canva the night before. The client was polite but confused. I was livid. After the call, I asked her, quietly, calmly, not to undermine me again during a negotiation. Her response? "Relax, Adam. You're good with the numbers. I'm good with people. We make a great team." It wasn't what she said. It was the way she said it. Like I was some bean-counting footnote in her big success story. Like all the years I had spent grinding meant nothing next to her Instagram-friendly marketing slogans and hand gestures. I brought it up to my parents. Told them we needed clearer roles. That I respected Sarah's ideas, but she was disrupting long-term operations. My dad looked uncomfortable. My mom just shook her head. "She's just trying to help. Don't be so territorial." Territorial. That word sat with me like a brick in my stomach. I wasn't being territorial. I was protecting the business. Our business. But something had shifted. Suddenly, Sarah was the star. I was the technician. The background guy. The boring brother. Things got worse from there. She started hosting weekly staff meetings without me, made changes to the company website, took credit for a referral program I had designed a year earlier. I tried to stay calm, professional. I told myself the truth would win out, that my parents would see the results, the loyalty of our clients, the systems I had built. But they didn't want to see. Then came the bombshell. It was a Friday afternoon, a week before the end of the quarter. My parents called me into their office. I thought it was to discuss numbers or projections. Instead, they sat me down, side by side, eyes filled with something between pity and rehearsed resolution. "We've been thinking," my dad started, "about the future of the company." I nodded, expecting a conversation about growth, maybe expansion. "And we've decided," my mom said, "that Sarah is better suited to take over." The room went quiet. "Take over what?" I asked. "The business," my dad said softly. "You're great at what you do, Adam. You've kept the wheels turning. But leadership requires something else. Charisma. Vision. You've always been a bit more comfortable in the background." I felt the ground tilt under me. "Are you serious?" "She just connects with people so naturally," my mom added. "You're so technical. She's the face." I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. I felt like I was watching my own funeral. After everything I'd done, the sacrifices, the loyalty, the years I gave up dating, traveling, even hobbies, because I was building this thing with them. And now, I was being shoved aside. Politely, quietly, because I wasn't shiny enough. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just nodded, stood up, and walked out. Packed my things that night. Cleared my desk. Turned in my keys. I didn't say goodbye. And I didn't plan on coming back. But funny thing about the face of the business? Sometimes, clients don't care about the face. They care about the hands, the ones who did the work, built the trust, kept their promises. And it didn't take long before cracks started to show. That's when things got interesting. I wish I could say I walked away with a clean break, that I packed up my car, blasted some Freedom playlist, and hit the open road without looking back. But the truth is, I didn't go anywhere. I moved into a small rental apartment about 15 minutes away, the kind with cracked tile and a faint smell of old carpet. I didn't leave town. I didn't want to. This was still my home, my clients, my network, the relationships I built. I wasn't ready to disappear just because my parents decided I didn't have the right personality for their shiny new vision. The first week after I left the business was weird. Really weird. My phone was oddly quiet. No last-minute calls from a stressed client. No requests for quotes. No supply chain issues. I didn't realize how much my identity had been tied up in the constant, low-level chaos of the company until it was gone. It felt like the silence after a fire drill, unnerving. Then on day 6, I got an email. It was from one of our largest clients, a real estate development firm that had been with us since I was a teenager. I had personally handled every project for them for the past 5 years. The subject line read, "Quick check-in." I opened it expecting a question about an order or maybe a follow-up on their last delivery. But it wasn't that. It was a polite, slightly confused message asking if I was still with the company. Apparently, they tried to reach me, but Sarah had told them I was no longer involved in client-facing matters. The email ended with a subtle but unmistakable hint. "If you're available for freelance consultation, we'd love to catch up." I didn't respond right away. Not out of pettiness. Honestly, I didn't know what to say. Technically, I had no non-compete, no employment contract. I'd always been treated more like a family obligation than a formal employee. So I sat on the message, read it 5 more times, then shut my laptop and went for a walk. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept hearing my parents' words on repeat. "You're just not a people person," and wondering how many people I'd kept happy over the years without any of them noticing. All those nights staying late to fix a job that jammed. All those holiday weekends I skipped so we wouldn't miss a deadline. Did none of that matter? Apparently not. By the start of the second week, the calls started coming in. Quiet ones. Awkward ones. "Hey Adam, weird question, but did you leave the company? I called the office and your sister said everything's being restructured. What's going on?" One by one, clients I had worked with for years started reaching out, trying to make sense of what happened. I didn't badmouth anyone. I didn't explain. I just told them the truth. I wasn't with the company anymore, and no, I didn't know what their next steps were. That was all I said, and that was all it took. By the end of the second week, I heard through the grapevine that one of our most loyal clients had pulled out of their contract. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even smile. It felt sad, like watching your childhood home slowly burn down while the new owners insisted everything was just fine. Then came the texts. First from a warehouse employee I used to eat lunch with every Wednesday. Then from a customer service rep. Then from one of the sales guys. Same story, different details. Sarah was changing everything. Shifting vendors. Rebranding our logo into something sleek and minimalist that looked like a tech startup. Laying off 2 part-time drivers because she thought outsourcing deliveries would be more agile. They told me morale was tanking. That Sarah had started holding all-staff meetings where she used words like synergy and market disruption, and no one knew what the meetings were actually about. My dad had taken a back seat, barely coming in. My mom was mostly busy posting filtered team photos on the company's new Instagram page with captions like fresh energy at our core and family business reimagined. One day, a staff member texted me a photo. It was a whiteboard with a new slogan written in marker, "Not your dad's print shop." That one stung more than I expected. I didn't say anything publicly, but inside, something started to twist. Not rage exactly, more like betrayal layered with disbelief. How had they erased me so easily? How could my own family let this happen? Then, as if the universe wanted to add insult to injury, I got an invitation. A printed one. Glossy cardstock. Embossed logo. You're invited to celebrate the new era of company name. Join us for an exclusive rebranding launch party. My name was printed on the envelope, but the greeting was generic. No note from my parents. No mention of my years of work. Just a flyer inviting me to come admire my sister's shiny new empire. I didn't go, but someone who did go told me how Sarah gave a speech. Talked about transformational leadership, the next generation, and how she stepped in to help modernize a legacy system that had stagnated. No mention of the fact that she'd only been there for a few months. No mention of me at all. That was the moment I realized they weren't just moving forward without me. They were rewriting the story. The next week, I ran into my mom at the grocery store. It was awkward. She acted surprised, like she hadn't expected to see me in the frozen foods aisle of our local market, even though we both lived 10 minutes apart. "Adam." "Oh, honey, how are you?" I gave her a polite nod, asked how things were going. "They're going well," she said, a little too quickly. "Sarah's really coming into her own. She has such a gift for leadership. The staff just loves her." I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" She hesitated, then shifted her smile into something more strained. "Well, she's still learning. But she has the vision, you know? That spark. And what about the 2 drivers she let go? Or the client that just pulled out last week?" Her face flickered. "Transitions are always bumpy, Adam. You know that." I wanted to ask her something. Anything that might reveal a crack in the story. Some sign that they missed me. That they realized what they'd done. Instead, she patted my arm and said, "You were always so dependable. We're just giving Sarah a chance to grow. You understand, right?" And there it was again. The way they framed it. Like I was the sturdy training wheels they'd finally outgrown. Later that night, I sat in my apartment, stared at the ceiling, and let the weight of it all settle on me. I wasn't just cut out. I was replaced. Forgotten. Rewritten. But I wasn't gone. I had options. I had contacts. I had half a dozen former clients quietly asking if I was considering freelance work. And for the first time in weeks, I started to think, maybe I should say yes. Not for revenge. Not out of spite. But because I couldn't watch them ruin what we built without doing something. That same week, I got a LinkedIn message from a mid-level marketing manager at one of our oldest clients. She was polite but direct. "Hey Adam, not sure what's going on with the company, but we've noticed some quality issues with the last few orders. Would love to chat if you're available." I met her for coffee. No suits. No contracts. Just 2 people talking honestly. She told me they were considering pulling out. That Sarah had missed 3 deadlines in 2 weeks. That their rep had changed twice in a month. That she felt like the company no longer valued the relationship. I nodded, listened, and finally said, "I'm considering starting something new. Smaller. Focused. Relationship-based." Her eyes lit up. "If you do, let us know. We'd switch tomorrow." I didn't sleep that night either, but for a different reason. That was the first domino. Others followed. One by one, calls trickled in. People who had worked with me for years wanted updates. Some wanted to vent. Some wanted advice. A few just wanted to know if I was okay. I wasn't planning anything yet. But then I heard what Sarah did next. And that's when things truly crossed a line. It was late October when everything changed. The leaves were just starting to turn that brilliant red gold that always makes you feel like maybe the world isn't so bad after all. I remember because I was walking through the park near my apartment, earbuds in, trying to clear my head, when my phone buzzed with a text from Jamie, one of the few people still working at the print shop who hadn't completely drunk the Sarah Kool-Aid. Jamie, you're not gonna like this. Check your inbox. I stopped walking. The wind blew a swirl of leaves around my feet. I stood there for a minute, staring at my phone before I even opened my email app. Subject: New company press release. Internal announcement only. I clicked it, and there it was. A full-page announcement, dressed up in corporate buzzwords and faux inspirational quotes about the company's next phase of transformation. But buried in the second paragraph was the knife. To honor our new direction and leadership, we're excited to unveil the rebranding of our company, effective immediately. Company name will now operate under the new name, S. Hart Creative Solutions. S. Hart, as in Sarah Hart, my sister. She didn't just rename the company. She named it after herself. I didn't even realize I had stopped breathing until I felt my lungs start to ache. I stood there, rooted to the sidewalk like someone had punched me in the ribs. The same company my dad built from scratch in the 80s. The same company I helped modernize, expand, and hold together through recessions, client losses, supply chain nightmares, and everything in between. The same company where I once spent the entire Christmas Eve fixing a last-minute job so a client could get his order in time for a charity event. Gone. Not even a trace of the original name. She had rewritten history again. Only this time, she put her name on the cover. I didn't go home right away. I wandered the neighborhood in a kind of daze, walking nowhere in particular. At some point, I realized I was near the old strip mall where Dad's original shop used to be, back when it was just him and a single copier in a rented unit with flickering lights and half a parking lot. I stood in front of the vacant space for a long time. S. Hart Creative Solutions. It sounded like an influencer brand, not a family business. Not something built with decades of sweat, missed birthdays, and 6 a.m. coffee-fueled deliveries. I got home late that night. I didn't answer texts. Didn't eat. I just sat at my desk, staring at the blinking cursor on a blank document. The next day, I heard from a former client, my favorite actually, a small publishing house that did limited-run memoirs and community history projects. They were always kind, thoughtful, old school in the best way. Adam, I don't want to put you in a weird position, their founder told me over the phone, but your sister sent us a pitch for a total rebrand of our books. Said the new company direction didn't align with our current aesthetic. She implied, we might not be a good fit anymore. I felt something twist in my chest. She said that. Well, not in so many words. But it was clear. She kept talking about modernity, trendiness, next-gen visual identity. You know how our work isn't about that. We preserve memories. That's the whole point. I swallowed hard. Did she cancel your contract? No. But she told us the pricing structure would change significantly going forward, and that we might want to consider alternative service providers if we couldn't adapt. It hit me like a freight train. She was pushing them out, pushing out the clients she didn't like, the ones that didn't fit her brand, the ones who'd been with us for decades, who kept us afloat through thin years, slow seasons, and startup competition, the ones I had built long-standing, personal relationships with. And she was doing it deliberately. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay awake thinking about all the clients we used to hand-deliver proofs to, the mom-and-pop real estate agencies who treated us like family, the little local schools we printed yearbooks for even when their budgets were tight, the nonprofits who couldn't afford full services, but we helped anyway. She was erasing them, erasing us. And that's when I did something I hadn't done since I left. I went back, not to the office, but to the building. I parked across the street in my car, late in the evening, and just watched. The lights were on. A few employees were still working, new faces I didn't recognize. Then I saw Sarah walk out. She was wearing a bright orange blazer, talking animatedly on the phone, laughing. She didn't even look back at the building, just hopped into her car and drove off like she owned the world. Because she did. For now. 2 days later, I got another text from Jamie. This one just said, she's claiming she built the CRM from scratch. Said the old system was non-existent before her. That's when I lost it. I don't mean I screamed or threw something. I mean something inside me, something that had still been holding on to hope, finally snapped. She was lying. Boldly. Openly. taking credit for everything I had built over a decade. Not just the client relationships, not just the day-to-day operations, but the very system that had kept the company organized and running. The thing I stayed up nights customizing, debugging, training staff to use. And she said it didn't exist before her. It was like watching someone rob your house, set it on fire, and then blame you for not decorating it properly. I decided I needed to talk to my parents. Not to yell, not to argue, just to know, to hear it from them, to ask them how far they were willing to let this go. I called. My mom answered. Hi, sweetheart. Hey, can I come by? Just to talk. Of course. You know you're always welcome. But I didn't feel welcome the moment I stepped through that door. There was something in the air, strained politeness. Smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. We sat in the living room. I asked them, flat out. Did you know Sarah renamed the company after herself? They glanced at each other. It was her idea, my dad finally said, shifting in his seat. She's trying to create a more modern brand identity. Something that reflects her leadership. I blinked. Her leadership? My mom nodded slowly. She's the CEO now, Adam. That comes with creative direction. I stared at them. Do you even hear yourselves? You gave her the company. She's rewriting history. She's lying about the systems. She's pushing out old clients. She's innovating, my mom corrected gently. You always said the business needed to evolve. That's not what this is, I said, my voice sharper now. You know it. She's cutting out the heart of everything we built. She's burning the bridges we spent years building. And you're letting her. My dad looked tired. Older than I remembered. It's not that simple, Adam. She has investors now. People interested in expansion. She said the legacy model was too dependent on outdated relationships. Outdated? I nearly laughed. Those outdated relationships were loyal. They carried us through the pandemic. They trusted us. And now you're trading them in for Instagram posts and buzzwords. Silence. Then my mom said the words I'll never forget. She's the future, Adam. You're the past. It didn't matter what I said after that. Nothing would land. They'd made their choice. They weren't just standing by. They were complicit. I stood up. My legs felt shaky. I hope you enjoy your new creative solutions. But don't expect me to pretend this didn't happen. My mom reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I didn't yell. I didn't slam the door. But something about the quiet way I left made it worse, I think. Because 3 days later, I got a legal notice. A letter from a law firm I recognized. Sarah had worked with them briefly during her third attempt at a communications degree. The letter was polite, but clear. They were formally requesting that I cease and desist from contacting former clients of Heart Creative Solutions. The letter accused me of intellectual property interference, claimed that my attempts to solicit business could be seen as an infringement of company rights. I sat there reading the letter over and over, my hands numb. She wasn't just trying to erase me anymore. She was trying to silence me. I didn't tell anyone about the letter at first. I just stared at it. 3 pages of carefully constructed legal phrasing, dressed up in cold professionalism, but unmistakably laced with Sarah's fingerprints. It didn't scream, "We're suing you," but it whispered something worse. "We want to make your life difficult. We want you scared. We want you quiet." And the most painful part? It was signed by a firm that I had once brought in for a contract review during our first major commercial lease agreement. I had worked side by side with one of the partners. I'd given them business, introduced them to my parents. They used to send me holiday cards. Now they were sending me threats. I remember just sitting there in my kitchen, the letter spread across the table, my dinner untouched, and going cold. My apartment felt too small, too quiet. Even the ticking of the cheap wall clock started to sound like mockery. Every minute that passed was another reminder of how far things had fallen. And I wasn't angry anymore. I was just hollow. I had been pushed out of my own legacy, replaced in the story by someone who barely knew how the machines worked. My parents, my own parents, had chosen the easier option, the flashier one, the one who didn't ask uncomfortable questions or remind them of the sacrifices it took to build something real. Sarah didn't want a business. She wanted an aesthetic, and the cost of that aesthetic was me. I didn't reply to the letter. Not right away. I called a lawyer friend instead, Nathan, someone I'd known from college who now worked in small business law. We met for coffee, and I slid the letter across the table without saying a word. He read it once, then again. He didn't say much at first. Finally, he looked up. "They're trying to intimidate you." I nodded. "Can they actually do anything?" "Well," he tapped the last paragraph. "There's no employment contract. No signed non-compete. Technically, unless you're actively stealing proprietary information or using their client list, they don't have much ground. I'm not doing any of that, I said. These are people who contacted me. I didn't reach out first. Then you're fine. Legally, anyway. Morally? That's a whole other battlefield. He paused. Are you going to fight this? I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have one, but because at that moment, I didn't know which answer was worse. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, arms crossed over my chest like a man trying to stay still while the house collapses around him. And slowly, an even more painful truth settled in. They weren't just trying to silence me. They expected me to disappear, to just fade, and I was dangerously close to letting them. The days that followed were heavy. I stopped taking most calls. I told the few clients still reaching out that I needed time. I stopped responding to texts from Jamie and others who were still trying to keep me looped in. I didn't check LinkedIn, didn't check email. I even let my car sit in the driveway for 4 days without moving it. For the first time in years, I had no work, no team, no purpose. I remember sitting in the park one afternoon, watching an older couple play chess at one of those concrete tables. The guy was slowly dragging his bishop across the board like it mattered more than anything else in the world. I watched them for almost an hour, just sitting there, numb. And then the guy made a move, looked up, and said something I couldn't hear, but his opponent laughed. Not a fake laugh. A real one. Easy. Familiar. And I don't know why, but something about that laugh broke something in me. Because I realized I couldn't even remember the last time I laughed like that. Everything in my life had become so wrapped up in the business. In being useful. In being needed. I didn't know who I was without it. But I was starting to. One small piece at a time. It started with a notebook. Not a laptop. Not a spreadsheet. Just a simple, spiral-bound notebook I found in the back of a drawer. I took it to the coffee shop down the street one morning and just started writing. Not planning. Not plotting revenge. Just writing. I wrote about how I used to help my dad load the ink drums when I was 12. About the time I stayed up until 3 a.m. designing a rush order for a wedding that had been rescheduled after a hurricane. About the client who brought me cookies every December for 10 years because I once caught a typo in her church bulletin the night before printing. Little things. Moments. Things that Sarah didn't know about, didn't care about, because to her the business was about branding and press releases and synergy. To me, it was about people. After a few days of this, I started writing down names. Not clients, relationships. Who had I helped? Who had I solved problems for? Who had I shown up for? Over and over, when no one else would. The list was longer than I expected. By the end of the week, I had 10 names circled, not as targets, not as leads, just people who mattered, people who might want to build something better, something real. That weekend, I got a voicemail from my dad. I hadn't spoken to him since the living room conversation. His voice was careful, tired. Hey, Adam. I just wanted to check in. I know things have been difficult. I don't really know what to say, but your mom and I, well, we're just hoping you're okay. Maybe we can talk soon. He didn't mention the rebrand. Didn't mention the cease and desist. Didn't apologize. And for once, I didn't feel an urge to call back. Because I knew what would happen. We'd talk. He'd say something vague about moving on. And I'd pretend to be okay, and the cycle would start again. So I didn't call. I didn't need their permission anymore. Instead, I started to walk every morning. It became a ritual. Up at 7. Out the door by 7:30, coffee in hand. I didn't check email before I left. I didn't bring work with me. I just walked. And slowly, the noise in my head began to quiet. I started reading again. Books I hadn't touched in years. Fiction. Business memoirs. Even some old printer manuals. Don't ask me why. There was something comforting about it. Like relearning a language you once spoke fluently. Then one night, I got a call from Mrs. Alvarez. She was the founder of the nonprofit we used to print holiday cards for every year. She was in her 70s now. Kind, stubborn, sharp as ever. Adam, she said without preamble, I heard what they did. I stayed quiet. I don't care about their branding. I care about how you always answered the phone, even on a Sunday. I care about how you found a way to deliver a last-minute job the day before Christmas Eve because our delivery van broke down. I care about people, not logos. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thanks, Mrs. Alvarez. That means more than you know. Well, she said, I've got a list of things I need printed. If you're not too busy being a hermit, maybe we can talk. We met for lunch 2 days later. She wasn't the only one. By mid-November, for more clients had quietly reached out. No drama, no declarations, just subtle messages, asking if I might consider starting something, if I might want to work together again, if I could help. I still hadn't made a decision. Not fully, but I was closer. And then one morning, as I sat in that same coffee shop with my notebook, Jamie walked in. He saw me before I saw him. Walked straight over. "Hey," he said. "Hey." He sat down across from me without asking. Looked exhausted. "You won't believe what happened." I raised an eyebrow. "What now?" He took a deep breath. "Sarah just fired Kevin. He's been there since your dad opened the second location. 20 years. Said he was undermining the new vision." I blinked. "Kevin? He's the most loyal guy on staff." Jamie nodded. "She's cleaning house. Anyone who questions her? Gone. Doesn't matter how long they've been there." I stared at my notebook. "She's not running a business," I said quietly. "She's running a cult." Jamie hesitated, then leaned in. "If you started something, just saying, there are a lot of people who'd follow." I didn't answer. Not yet. But later that night, I opened my laptop, created a new folder, titled it Second Draft. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was writing my story again. I didn't announce it to anyone. No social media posts. No big declarations. No LinkedIn job title change with a bunch of fake humility like, "Excited to start this new chapter. Grateful for all the lessons." I wasn't doing this for applause. I was doing it because I couldn't not do it anymore. The first thing I did was rent a tiny office space in the same strip mall where my dad's original print shop once stood. It felt poetic in a way, returning to the roots while they chased after something shiny. The place was cheap, barely 500 square feet, and smelled faintly of bleach and old drywall. But it had a window, a real window, and when I opened it, I could hear the faint hum of traffic and birds, like the city itself was whispering, "Welcome back." I didn't have a business name yet. Didn't have a logo, a website, or even a business card. But I had a phone, and a chair, and a second-hand desk with a scratch across the top that looked like a lightning bolt. I sat down and made a list. Clients I trust. People I respect. Things I won't compromise on. That last one was the most important. Because if I was going to rebuild, I was going to do it on my terms. No slogans. No hollow branding. Just good work. Honest relationships. And zero tolerance for people who valued optics over substance. I named the company Redline Printworks. Simple. A nod to the margin of a page. The place where most people stop, but where I planned to begin. Word spread slowly at first. Just a whisper here and there. A forwarded email. A casual mention during a networking event. But within 2 weeks, I had 5 former clients scheduling meetings. By week 3, I was scrambling to keep up with orders using a single rented copier and late-night runs to the 24-hour supply warehouse. It wasn't glamorous. I was doing everything: quotes, production, deliveries. Some days I was elbow-deep in toner dust. Other days I was hunched over my laptop building invoice templates from scratch. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't dragging myself out of bed. I wanted to work. I started sleeping better, eating better, laughing even. It was like I'd been holding my breath for years without realizing it. And now I could finally breathe. By the end of the first month, I had 12 active clients, 9 of which were former accounts that had quietly left us. Heart Creative Solutions without making a scene. They didn't want to be part of whatever rebranding circus Sarah was running. They just wanted someone they could rely on. Someone who remembered the small stuff. That was me. Always had been. I hired my first employee in month 2. A part-time admin named Chloe who'd previously interned at the old shop before Sarah phased out the internship program for being too analog. Chloe was smart, fast, and organized in a way that made me wonder why she wasn't running her own company. She handled the back end so I could focus on the clients. A month later, I brought in Kevin. Yep, that Kevin. 20-year veteran, quietly fired for undermining Sarah's vision. When he showed up to our first lunch meeting, he looked tired, defeated, like someone who'd been tossed out of his own family. I didn't pitch him. I just told him what I was building. At the end of the conversation, he said, "You let me do the logistics and workflow. You don't need to pay me much. I just want to do real work again." He started the next day. By the end of month 3, we'd outgrown the tiny office. I rented a larger unit, still humble, but with room for 2 copiers, a cutting machine, and a break area that doubled as a second desk when needed. We painted the walls ourselves one weekend. Chloe brought muffins. Kevin made a playlist. It felt less like a business and more like a team. And then came the phone call that changed everything. It was from a guy named Warren Blake, VP of marketing at one of the largest commercial developers in the region. We'd worked with them years ago at my parents' shop. Warren and I had built a good rapport back then, but he went quiet after the rebrand. He opened the call with a laugh. "So, I hear you're back in the game." I chuckled. "I guess the rumors are true. Got a question for you," he said. "Can you handle a 10,000-piece campaign with variable data printing, staggered delivery to 12 regional offices, and a 2-week turnaround?" I nearly dropped the phone. I took a breath. "If I say yes, you'll give me the job?" "I've seen what the other shop's doing," he said, voice suddenly flat. "Late deliveries. Wrong formatting. And the last set came with a typo on the cover page. I miss working with someone who triple-checks the details." We delivered the project a day early. After that, it snowballed. Warren referred us to 2 other companies. One of them referred us to 3 more. Suddenly, I wasn't chasing work. It was finding me. I started getting emails from people who didn't even know me directly, just of me. "Heard you're the guy who gets it done. Someone said you're the print whisperer. Saw your work on the Jones campaign. Need something like that, but faster." I kept the team small, lean. I didn't want to grow too fast and become what I'd walked away from. But I made one rule. Everyone who works here knows the clients by name. No automated phone trees. No copy-pasted emails. We knew our people, their preferences, their quirks. We'd send handwritten thank yous after big jobs. Toss in free samples of new stock when we tried it out. Every client felt like they mattered, because they did. Meanwhile, whispers started floating in from the other side of town. The rebranded Heart Creative Solutions wasn't going well. Sarah had tried to position the business as a creative lifestyle brand, whatever that meant. She hired a flashy branding agency to redo the website, plastered with glossy photos of sleek desks and air plants. But behind the scenes, morale was crumbling. Jamie texted occasionally with updates. 3 more longtime employees had left. Turnover in the customer service team was a revolving door. Orders were late. Clients were confused by the rebrand and unsure who to contact anymore. But the worst part? Clients were leaving, and no one knew where they were going. They didn't know because no one was saying it out loud. They were coming to me. Quietly. Steadily. One day, Jamie called and said she held a meeting and accused the staff of sabotage. Said someone must be leaking client info. I laughed. "I haven't asked for a single client. They came on their own." He paused. "I know, but she doesn't understand that. She thinks it's all about marketing and image. She doesn't get that it's about trust." By the 6-month mark, Redline Printworks had a wait list. An actual wait list. We were booked solid for 3 weeks out. I had to rent a 3rd printer and lease warehouse space for overflow storage. I was working longer hours than ever, but I didn't feel drained. I felt alive. My parents hadn't reached out since the voicemail. No apology. No explanation. But one Saturday morning, I got an email from my mom. Just one line. "Your father isn't sleeping." That was it. No greeting. No signature. Just that sentence. And it hit me harder than I expected. Because part of me, a very small part, still wanted to believe they'd come around. That they'd see the mistake. That maybe this was all some grand misunderstanding, and they'd finally say, "We're sorry. We were wrong." But I knew better. Some people don't apologize. They just suffer quietly and hope someone else breaks first. I wasn't going to be that person. I had broken before, but not anymore. I was standing now. And then, one day, the call I never expected came in. It was from Sarah. The caller ID popped up while I was in the middle of reviewing proofs with Chloe. I stared at the screen for a long second before excusing myself and stepping into the hallway. I answered. "Hello." Silence. Then, "Adam." "Hi." Her voice was strained. Polite. Not warm. "I didn't think you'd pick up," she added quickly. "What do you need?" There was a pause on the other end. I could hear the distant hum of what sounded like an air purifier. "We're in a bit of a tight spot," she said. "And I thought maybe we could talk." I leaned against the wall. "Talk," I repeated. "Just, maybe see if there's a way to, I don't know, work together? I know we had our differences, but things have changed. I've changed." I nearly laughed. But I didn't. I just said one word. "What happened?" She hesitated. And that's when I heard it in her voice. Not the spin. Not the polished facade. But fear. Real fear. Something had gone wrong. Something big. And she needed help. But she didn't know the worst part yet. I wasn't coming back. Because I wasn't hers to call anymore. And I was just getting started. I didn't respond right away. I just stood there in the hallway of my shop, listening to the soft static hum of Sarah's hesitation on the other end of the line. I could practically hear her clenching her jaw, trying to decide if she should soften her tone or double down. For a moment, I said nothing, and the silence stretched so long it almost became its own statement. Finally, I spoke. "You said you wanted to talk," I said calmly. "So talk." She jumped on the invitation like she'd been holding her breath. "Look," she said, "I know things didn't go the way they should have. I know we had our issues. But I think we're both in a position now where we can." "No." I cut her off, not with anger but with clarity. "You're in a position. I'm in a business." Another long pause. "Adam, come on," she sighed. "Do you really want to keep doing this? It's just pride at this point. We're family." I felt a muscle in my cheek twitch. Family. That word had started to sound less like comfort and more like a smokescreen. "You want something," I said, "and you're hoping I forgot everything that happened." "I haven't." Her tone stiffened. "Fine. The truth is, we lost 3 of our biggest contracts in the past 2 months. Projects are behind. We've had multiple returns. I've had to do damage control just to keep us afloat. Our margins are underwater, and why are you telling me this?" "Because I need help." There it was. The truth. Plain, bitter, and oddly satisfying. She needed me now. The same person she'd erased, replaced, branded as obsolete. The irony could have filled a billboard. I leaned against the wall, watching Chloe through the window as she laughed with Kevin over something on his tablet. "I'm booked out for the next 6 weeks," I said evenly. "Even if I wanted to help, which I don't have the bandwidth." "Adam, I'm not asking for a handout." "Then what are you asking for?" She hesitated again, and I swear I could hear her pride crack just a little more. "A merger," she said finally. That caught me off guard. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me. A merger. Redline has the clients, the trust, the execution. Hart has the brand equity, the network, the infrastructure." I let out a short, humorless breath through my nose. "You really believe that?" She ignored the jab. "We'd be stronger together. You know that." "No, Sarah. You'd be stronger." "I'm already strong." It hung in the air like a challenge. She didn't have a rebuttal. After a few seconds, she said, "Just think about it, okay?" I didn't respond. I just hung up. I stood there for a minute, breathing slowly, grounding myself. Because as tempting as it was to slam the door shut forever, I had a different idea. An idea that started as a seed the second she said the word merger. I walked back into the office, where Kevin and Chloe were looking at me like kids waiting to hear if the monster under the bed was real. "Well?" Kevin asked. I dropped into the chair and grinned. "She's drowning." Chloe raised her eyebrows. "And she asked you for help?" "Yup." Kevin leaned forward, his face a mix of disbelief and amusement. "What are you going to do?" And that's when the idea solidified. I wasn't just going to leave her sinking. I was going to throw her a rope covered in hooks. I didn't respond for 2 days. Let her stew. Let the tension build. I needed her desperate enough to overlook her ego, but not so panicked she'd start looking elsewhere. Timing was key. On the 3rd day, I sent her a message. "We can talk. Neutral ground. Just the 2 of us." She replied within 5 minutes. We met at a quiet coffee shop in a part of town neither of us frequented anymore. It used to be a rundown corner lot, but now it was filled with tiny boutiques and overpriced oat milk lattes. The kind of place where people wore scarves year-round and said things like, "Vibe check," unironically. I got there first, ordered black coffee, sat by the window. When she walked in, she looked tired. Not in the "I pulled an all-nighter" kind of way, but in the "my world is coming apart and I can't stop it" kind of way. Still, she was wearing her favorite power blazer and carrying a leather-bound planner like she was trying to project control. She sat down. No hug. No smile. "Thanks for meeting me," she said. I nodded. "Let's get to it," I said. "Why a merger?" She opened her planner like she was about to pitch to a boardroom. I let her talk about brand synergy, strategic consolidation, vertical integration. A dozen buzzwords that sounded impressive but meant very little in practice. Then she made the real pitch. "You take over operations. Keep the team, the processes, the client interface. I focus on marketing, scaling, and brand partnerships. Together, we cover both sides of the business." I didn't smile. I didn't nod. Instead, I leaned in slightly and asked, What's the debt ratio on Heart right now? She blinked. That's not relevant. It is if I'm absorbing it. She shifted. We're leveraged, but how leveraged? Moderately. I chuckled. Define moderately. She hesitated. About $240,000 in outstanding debt. Some short-term, some vendor credit, some equipment leases. I raised an eyebrow. And client retention? She hesitated again. I already knew the answer. I'd been hearing it for months through the grapevine, but I needed her to say it. We've lost a few major accounts. How many? She finally looked away. 7. I sat back in my chair. Why would I take on a drowning company with 7 lost contracts and nearly $250,000 in debt? She opened her mouth, then closed it. I waited. Then, slowly, she said, because I'm offering 50% ownership. I kept a straight face, but inside, I was smiling. Bingo. She was offering me equal stake, thinking that was generous, without realizing she was offering me control. Because what she didn't know was that Redline was already positioned to overtake her market entirely. But I wasn't just interested in a power play. I wanted something deeper. I wanted to undo what she'd done. Not just to me, but to everyone she'd steamrolled. The clients she ghosted. The staff she discarded. The legacy she twisted into something shallow and plastic. So I said the only thing she needed to hear. I'll consider it, but only under certain conditions. Her eyes lit up, just a flicker, but she tried to hide it. What kind of conditions? And that's when I laid them out. Firmly, clearly, quietly. Condition 1, full financial transparency. I would bring in my own accountant to audit every aspect of Heart's books. No exceptions. Condition 2, complete operational control. I handle the day-to-day, the staffing, the client contracts. She stays out of it. Condition 3, silent equity for her, at least for the first year. No public leadership. No co-CEO nonsense. She could collect dividends, but not speak for the company. She balked. That's not a merger. That's a takeover. I shrugged. Call it what you want. That's the deal. She looked away, chewing the inside of her cheek. I leaned in. You don't have time to find someone else. You know it. I'm your only way out. So you can either keep pretending you're running a company, or you can let me save it. And you. She didn't answer, but she didn't storm out either, which meant I had her. And I wasn't done yet. Over the next 2 weeks, we exchanged documents. I brought in my accountant, an old colleague named Priya who had a mind like a trap and didn't flinch at uncomfortable truths. What we found was worse than I expected. Sarah hadn't just over-leveraged the company. She'd gutted it. Over $80,000 spent on brand partnerships that amounted to nothing, for separate contracts with influencer marketing agencies that produced zero ROI. Leasing high-end equipment that sat unused because no one knew how to operate it. But the worst part? A list of laid-off employees, quietly replaced with low-cost interns or remote freelancers who had no loyalty to the company and no training. She wasn't running a business. She was running a fantasy and charging it to a company card. I met with Priya in private after the audit. She raised an eyebrow. You sure you want to do this? Yes. You're inheriting a mess. I know. She paused. But you're also inheriting leverage. I nodded slowly, because she was right. I had the truth now. The financials. The proof. Everything Sarah had hidden under her sleek branding and buzzwords. I had in black and white. And I knew how to use it. But I wasn't rushing in. Not yet. This wasn't the revenge. This was the setup. And when the moment came, I wouldn't just take back what was mine. I'd make sure everyone finally saw the truth. Including her. I waited almost a month before making my move. Not because I was scared, but because timing mattered more than satisfaction. Anyone can get angry. But revenge? Real revenge takes patience. You have to let the other person believe they're safe, that things are finally settling down, that maybe you've forgiven them. That's when the ground beneath them starts to crack. And when it does, they don't even have time to brace. Sarah thought the merger was going smoothly. She signed every document Priya sent her without looking too hard, eager to check the due diligence boxes so she could move on to the next strategic initiative. Her focus was on optics, always optics. I let her host her little PR events, gave her just enough rope to keep her busy while I went to work quietly, piece by piece, underneath the surface. The first step was consolidation. Redline Printworks and Heart Creative Solutions merged under a single umbrella, Redline Creative Group, a name that sounded neutral enough for her to stomach, but close enough to my brand that people would naturally associate it with me. The paperwork clearly stated that operational control rested with me. She technically still had 50% equity, but it was silent partnership equity, meaning she couldn't make executive decisions without my approval. It was in writing. Ironclad. Priya made sure of that. The second step was rebuilding trust with the right people. I reached out to every client Hart had lost, one by one. Calmly, professionally, I told them the company had undergone new management and that my focus was on restoring quality and reliability. Some were skeptical at first, but once they realized I was involved, they returned. They didn't even need to be convinced. They'd missed the way things used to run. Meanwhile, I started quietly reinstating old employees, the ones Sarah had fired or driven away. Kevin handled logistics, Chloe oversaw admin, and I even brought back 2 designers from the early days. We were building momentum again, one brick at a time. Sarah, meanwhile, was getting restless. Every week or so, she'd drop by the office, pretending to check in. She'd parade around in her designer heels, trying to reassert her presence, but no one really listened. The staff didn't fear her anymore. They respected me. One afternoon, she waltzed into the production floor and announced, "We should rebrand again. Maybe something more digital forward." I cut her off gently but firmly. "We're not changing the name, Sarah." She blinked, half offended, half disbelieving. "You're seriously turning down a rebranding opportunity?" "The data. Clients don't want another rebrand. They want consistency," I said. "We're not doing this again." Her lips tightened, but she didn't argue. She just muttered something about short-term vision and left. That was when I knew the shift was complete. She wasn't steering the ship anymore. She was just a passenger. Still, I knew her well enough to expect a last-ditch attempt to claw back control. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, it came. Sarah tried to call an emergency board meeting. What she didn't realize was that there was no board. Not in the way she thought. She'd signed documents merging all governance into the new structure, with me as the sole managing director. The board she was referring to was a legal placeholder. There were no voting rights for her to exercise. She sent me a long, dramatic email that started with, "This is completely unprofessional," and ended with, "I'm going to consult my lawyer." I replied with one sentence. "You're welcome to do that, but please review Section 4.3b of the operating agreement first." She did, and she went silent for a week. While she stewed, I executed Step 3. Reputation realignment. Every client update, every invoice, every project completion, all went out under Redline Creative Group. Hart Creative Solutions ceased to exist in practice, even if it still technically existed on paper. I began transitioning vendor accounts, payroll, and tax filings under the new name. By the time anyone outside the company noticed, it was already done. To the outside world, the merger was complete, and I was the public face. Sarah was nowhere to be seen. Then came the moment. It was a Thursday afternoon when Priya called me into the small conference room. She had that particular smile, the one that meant she'd found something interesting. "You should see this," she said, turning her laptop toward me. It was an email chain between Sarah and a marketing agency she'd hired months earlier, back when she was still running Hart Solo. She'd promised them a future equity stake in the business in exchange for promotional exposure. It was never disclosed in our merger paperwork. In legal terms, that's undeclared liability, a breach of contract. She'd lied. Again. "Can we prove it?" I asked. Priya nodded. "Already verified through the agency's records." I even pulled the signed proposal. "Want to guess the date?" I didn't need to. I already knew. It was 2 weeks before she'd asked me for help, meaning she'd been looking for a bailout partner while still trying to leverage the company behind the scenes. "Does this void her equity?" I asked. Priya smiled. "It voids her right to active partnership. And depending on how you want to play it, it can also trigger a buyout clause." I sat back, feeling that cold, come focus take over. Then we play it. Over the next few days, I gathered everything. Every document, every discrepancy, every late vendor payment tied to her tenure. Priya prepared a formal review report, packaged and ready. Then I scheduled a meeting with Sarah. She showed up 15 minutes late, looking flustered but trying to hide it. I waited until she sat before sliding the folder across the table. "What's this?" she asked, flipping through the pages. "Documentation," I said, "of the equity breach." Her brow furrowed as she skimmed the first page, then the next. What are you talking about? You entered into an agreement with an outside agency that guaranteed equity consideration, I said evenly. You didn't disclose it during the merger. That's a violation of Section 2.6 in our partnership agreement. She looked up sharply. You're twisting this. No, I'm quoting it. She flipped faster now, the paper's rustling. Her face drained of color when she reached the signature page from the agency. I can explain, she said quickly. I'm sure you can, I said. But you don't need to. The paperwork already does. She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. Here's what's going to happen, I said quietly. We're executing the buyout clause. You'll receive fair market value for your silent equity stake, minus the debt portion you brought into the merger. Priya's already calculated it. You'll get a wire transfer within 30 days. She stared at me. You can't do that. I can. And I am. You're cutting me out of my own company. I tilted my head. No, Sarah. You cut yourself out when you started treating it like a toy instead of a business. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. You think this is over? You think people won't find out what you did? I smiled faintly. They'll find out what you did first. Because the new audit filings go public next quarter. Her jaw clenched. For a moment, she looked like she might throw something. Then she just shook her head, grabbed her bag, and stormed out. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the glass. I sat there for a long moment, the silence humming in my ears. Then I picked up the folder she'd left behind, folded it neatly, and slid it into my drawer. I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. Just settled. The next few weeks were a blur of cleanup. Paperwork. Transitions. Adjustments. But with every document signed and every system migrated, the company became more mine. Fully mine. The rebranding went public in February. Redline Creative Group. A family business, reimagined. It was subtle, but deliberate. A quiet statement to the world. And to Sarah, that the story had come full circle. Clients noticed. Congratulated us. Some even joked about the name change. Glad to see it's in good hands again, one said over a call. I just smiled and said, we're trying our best. The funny thing is, revenge didn't feel like fire. It felt like calm water, cold, reflective, steady. Sarah had built her empire on mirrors and noise. I rebuilt mine on truth and silence. And when silence wins, it's deafening. But I wasn't done yet. Because one afternoon, Kevin walked into my office holding his phone, a small grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. You'll want to see this, he said. He turned the screen toward me. A news article. Hart Creative Solutions officially dissolves amid financial troubles. Sarah hadn't paid her remaining debts. Her brand name, the one she plastered across banners, mugs, and glossy business cards, was officially liquidated by the state. I leaned back in my chair, exhaled slowly, and said, let it rest. Kevin chuckled. You sure? We could pick up the name for pennies. I smiled faintly. No, let it die. Then I turned back to my work. But even as I did, I knew something she didn't. I hadn't just taken her company. I had something else. Something she didn't even realize she'd given me. And when the time came, that last piece would be the final nail in the coffin. The perfect ending. The fallout didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, like a leak behind the walls, quiet at first, then devastating once it hit the surface. After Sarah stormed out of our last meeting, there was a stretch of eerie quiet. No calls, no emails, not even a snide post online, which, for her, was almost unheard of. I kept expecting some sort of retaliation, maybe a smear campaign, a sudden lawsuit, or even one of her passive-aggressive brand statements about betrayal or creative differences. But nothing came, at least not directly. Instead, I started hearing about her unraveling from everyone but her. Chloe overheard from a friend in the startup scene that Sarah had tried pitching a new creative consultancy, something boutique, hyper-stylized, aimed at elevated brand experiences. But every investor she approached wanted to know what happened to her last venture. The whispers about unpaid debts, broken contracts, and the embarrassing collapse of Hart Creative Solutions had made their rounds faster than any of her past marketing campaigns ever had. Turns out, people notice when a brand crashes and burns, especially when it's named after you. Kevin heard from someone in logistics that she tried to rehire some of our former drivers under a new LLC, but no one took the bait. Word had gotten around. She had a reputation now, not just for failure, but for using people and tossing them aside. Her old employees talked. Clients talked. Even vendors talked. And when the industry starts talking, it's like trying to run a marathon with bricks tied to your ankles. Sarah was radioactive, but I didn't gloat. I didn't need to, because I had something she never did: loyalty. While she struggled to salvage her image, Redline Creative Group was thriving. We'd signed 3 new long-term contracts by mid-year and expanded into a second location across town. Kevin had streamlined operations so well that we were hitting margins we used to think were impossible. Chloe oversaw a small but brilliant team of junior admins. And I finally had time to do what I'd always wanted: mentor, build, shape something that lasts. We didn't just rebuild a business. We built a culture. One afternoon, as we wrapped up a quarterly review, Kevin pulled me aside. "You know she's trying to sell her condo, right?" he said casually. I blinked. "What?" "She's been meeting with realtors. Dropping the price, too. Probably bleeding money." I didn't say anything, but inside, I could feel the edges of something old and sharp finally dulling. There was no pleasure in her struggle, just closure. Then came the moment I didn't expect. I was walking through a downtown printer expo, something I used to attend with my dad back in the early days, when I saw her. Sarah. She was standing at a table alone, no badge, no booth, just sipping from a branded water bottle and watching the crowd with that same expression she used to wear in high school talent shows. Like she was desperate for someone to notice her, but terrified they actually might. She saw me. For a moment, I thought she might look away, but she didn't. She walked straight over. "Adam." "Sarah." She looked thinner, tired, still dressed like she was trying to be seen. Bright blazer, statement necklace, but the posture was different. Less upright, more resigned. "I heard the new location's doing well," she said, voice flat. "It is." A pause. She looked around. "This used to be your favorite event," she said. I didn't answer, just waited. She sighed, staring down into her water. "I messed up. That caught me off guard. I thought I could make it work. Thought if I just pushed hard enough, made enough noise. I don't know, that everything would fall into place. But it didn't." "No," I said. "It didn't." She nodded, eyes still down. "They're foreclosing on the condo. I can't cover the payments." I didn't respond. "I know you probably hate me," she said. "I don't," I said honestly. "But I don't trust you either." She looked up at that. And for once, I didn't see anger or pride. Just regret. "Fair." Another pause. Then she said something I never thought I'd hear. "Do you think Dad ever regretted it?" I took a breath. "I think he believed in you," I said. "He just didn't know who you really were. None of us did." She nodded again, then offered a faint, tired smile. "Well, at least now everyone does." She turned to leave, then hesitated. "I'm glad it's you," she said without looking back. "That's running it now?" "I mean that." And then she walked away. I stood there for a while after she disappeared into the crowd. Not because I was shaken, but because I realized something. I didn't need to win against her anymore. I'd already won without her. A few weeks later, I found a letter in my mailbox. Handwritten. No return address. It was from my dad. It started simply: "Adam, I've been meaning to write this for a long time, but I didn't know how. I made mistakes. A lot of them. Not just with the company, but with you." He went on to explain the pressure he'd felt watching the business age around him. How Sarah's boldness gave him hope for a new chapter, even though deep down he knew she didn't understand it the way I did. "Your mother and I thought we were choosing the future, but we were blind to the present. To you. And that's on us. We're proud of what you've built. Truly. I'm sorry it took losing it all for me to see what was right in front of me." At the bottom was a postscript. "If you ever feel like coming by, the porch light's on." I didn't cry, but I did sit on the couch for a while with the letter in my hands, thinking about all the years I'd given them, how much it hurt to be discarded, and how much more it meant to be seen now. I didn't call him. Not right away. But one night, I drove by the old house. The porch light was on, and that was enough for now. We held our annual client appreciation dinner the following month. It wasn't a flashy event, just good food, handwritten place cards, and a short speech I gave at the end about resilience, loyalty, and second chances. Afterward, as the guests mingled, Kevin clapped me on the back. "You did good, boss." "Thanks." He nodded toward the windows, where a line of former clients stood laughing over drinks. "You ever think about how close you were to just walking away?" I smiled. "All the time." He raised an eyebrow. "Any regrets?" I looked around. "The team." The energy, the peace. Then I shook my head. No, I said, not a single one. And in that moment, I realized I'd taken back more than just a company. I'd taken back my story, one they could never rewrite again.
W hash, you're right. Hi, David.